The latest usage rates for the month of March have been posted, and there's some pretty interesting trends to look at. A lot has remained the same, but big picture, there are a lot of interesting things to talk about. Here are my top 5 interesting observations. Number 1 is generally the Ubers tier. Any metagame where there are Pokemon that are much stronger than others tends to lead to centralization, that is, a few Pokemon get used so much more than everything else. This is not exactly groundbreaking research, the best Pokemon do in fact get used the most often, but we can see it here with Koraidon and Miraidon getting a ton of usage. Miraidon and Koraidon's abilities don't conflict with each other, and if anything they synergize well with ideas like U-turn Koraidon into Specs Miraidon. An interesting thing to note is Iron Tread's high usage rate. Iron Treads is the top Pokemon in Ubers because its typing is good versus Miraidon and Fluttermane. Miraidon does have Overheat to hit Iron Treads, so it's not a 100% counter, but having a good matchup versus 2 of the top Pokemon make it good, especially when it can be EV to boost special defense in electric terrain. It's interesting because Iron Treads has pretty low usage in OU and is barely avoiding dropping to UU. Its typing isn't as valuable in the OU tier because there's no Miraidon to worry about, and you have a rare situation where a Pokemon has more usage in the higher tier than it does in the lower tier. Number 2 is NFE Watch that is not fully evolved Pokemon. It's always fun to look at not fully evolved Pokemon and see how many of them are actually good. The highest ranking not fully evolved Pokemon is Bisharp. This is mainly because Bisharp was a good Pokemon even before the existence of King Gambit. It was always an OU, UU caliber Pokemon even in previous generations. Its stats are good, its typing is good, its ability is good, its moves are good, it's an overall good Pokemon. But even with Eviolite, King Gambit will be better than it, so it looks like Bisharp will be condemned to UU forever. The next not fully evolved Pokemon is Naclistak, the middle tier form of Garganacl. It's currently in the RU tier. Eviolite Naclistak behaves in the same way as Garganacl in standard play. Salt Cure is an amazingly good defensive move, and Knockoff is a rare move in Generation 9 because of its limited distribution. It plays in an extremely similar way to Garganacl, and it tries to rack up large amounts of residual damage with the combination of Salt Cure and its high defenses. In an RU context, Naclistak is able to hold its own. There's also Primeape in the RU tier, which uses a bulky Rage Fist moveset. It's obviously not as good as the Ghost type Annihilate, but it's still alright in the RU tier. Then we have the NU tier with Chansey and Crocalor. Chansey needs no explanation. It's the best special wall arguably of all time. Heavy Duty Boots Blissey is considered better than Chansey because of how common switching is, and Blissey is 1 tier above it in the RU tier. The reason both of them are so low and not in OU in the first place is because they lose a lot of momentum and don't even have Toxic anymore. Recover PP was also nerfed to 8, and they're just too passive even for stall teams. They just don't do a lot. Crocalor is intriguing and behaves similarly to Skeledirge of OU. It's an unaware Pokemon, and with Eviolite it's actually pretty tanky. Crocalor's problem is that without heavy duty boots it becomes a liability versus Stealth Rock, but otherwise it does have a really good defensive stat. You're mainly going to see Crocalor on NU stall teams to stop setup sweepers because Unaware is that good of an ability. It can actually be tricky to break Eviolite, Chansey, and Crocalor with NU caliber Pokemon. Entering PU, there's going to be a lot of not fully evolved Pokemon, and that's really where the line is blurred between fully evolved Pokemon and not fully evolved Pokemon. The PU tier is going to have a lot of the stronger not fully evolved Pokemon and a lot of the weaker fully evolved Pokemon. But that actually leads to number 3, Quaxwell. Quaxwell is the number 1 most used Pokemon in the PU tier, but it's not because it's a dominating threat. It's because it's one of the tier's few good Pokemon with hazard removal with the move Rapid Spin. Certain roles are extremely high value, and that means Pokemon with those roles get used up in the higher tiers. For example, Steel-type Pokemon are valuable, and good Steel-type Pokemon rarely ever drop down to the lower tiers. Similarly, hazard removal is incredibly important, and anything that can hazard remove effectively often sees a much higher usage than what their stats would indicate. As a result, lower tiers like PU don't often have good hazard removal options and have to dig deeper. Quaxwell is a symptom of that, and it's why an NFE is one of the top Pokemon in the tier. It's otherwise a decent enough Pokemon in a PU context, but hazard control makes it the number 1 Pokemon. At number 4, we have the impact of Walking Wake. Walking Wake was recently released into OU and instantly became one of the best Pokemon in the tier. It was even suspected for a ban, which meant that there would be a vote to see whether or not it would be banned. It was voted to not get banned, and because it's still legal in the OU metagame, we can see its impact on the tier. Walking Wake itself has a usage rate around 14%, but that's slightly inflated from people wanting to try it out because it's a new Pokemon. The number one most obvious change has been the rise of Slowking to combat Walking Wake. With Regenerator and its high special defense, it's able to effectively take on Walking Wake, and it's risen to the OU tier as a result. There's been other changes too, like Azumarill increasing in usage from 5% to 8%. It's going to be interesting to see how OU develops further, but beyond the Slowking rise, there hasn't been massive tangible changes. At number 5 is Toedscool reaching 55% usage in Little Cup as a staple ground type. The Great Tusk of Little Cup, it has Rapid Spin and Spore, which makes it valuable. It also has a decent enough attacking combination with Grass and Ground. Importantly, it hits 17 speed, which is a relatively important benchmark, and conveniently outspeeds Glimmet and hits it with Earth Power. It also gets Knockoff, which is a move with limited distribution in Generation 9, and is especially relevant in a tier dominated by Eviolite. The raw utility of it makes it so valuable. Rapid Spin and Knockoff will always be high value, and Spore is a great move. With its speed, Toedscool fills key roles for a team with very little drawback. Those are my top 5 observations from the usage stats. What else did you find interesting from the usage of March? Let me know down in the comment section below.